Hello everyone, in today's video I'm going to talk about this beautiful material, CDC. I'm going to talk about different properties of CDC such as shape, size, color, quality, all of this and why it is important for your tying. I'm gonna go relatively deep into everything and I'm gonna try to maybe solve you some issues that you have with CDC, how to use it, how to fish it, and let's see where we go. So first of all, I want to talk about shape because I think it's one of the most important features of CDC. My favorite would be triangular shape, as you can see here, and I love it because as you move those barbs up, they will all align at the tips. So meaning that you can utilize the whole feather if you're going to tie a fly, a winged fly. Another shape that I use relatively often is oval shape. This is oval shape CDC, and you can see that those barbs are not, like those lower barbs are not extending to the tip of the feather. They're just more or less same length all the way along the rachis here. Now I'm talking rachis, barbs, barbules and stuff. Let me just show you first what I mean. If this is a CDC feather, the piece of the feather that goes into the skin is called quill. Out of the quill extends rachis. And now sideways you have barbs. All those barbs can be different length, but on them you can find those barbules. And these barbs and barbules along with the rachis, they form quite a big, let's call it net, that has large surface, covers large surface, it's light, it traps water nicely, partially because it's super fine, super light, so it creates some surface tension between water and the fly, which makes it afloat. And it's also oily, so it's hydrophobic, in meaning that the water won't penetrate into it and it won't get waterlogged, so your fly will fly better because of all these features, but it's mainly because of the structure of CDC, not because of the oil. So if you do a simple test, if you have a couple of fish, you wash, rinse your fly, and then you dry it out fully with Amadou or paper tissue, and then with false casts, it will fly like it just tied on the tippet. Now, I was talking about different shapes. So we have rachis, barbs, and those small extensions, barbules. Take for example this beautiful feather here. As you already guessed, it's triangular shape. As you can see, those long barbs at the bottom will align nicely at the tip. So I would use this feather mostly for caddisfly wings, mayfly wings, so either horizontal wings with caddisflies or upright wings with mayflies. And that's more or less it. Now, what do you do with oval shape? You can make a wing for your fly, but depending on the size, this is what you're going to use, depending on the size of the hook, and this is what you're going to waste more or less. So that's quite a bit of waste, more than half of the feather. What I like to do with oval shaped feathers is two things. It's either wing for the flies or legs, colors, or whatever. So if you're going to use colors, you take a clip your feather, cut it, and use half or both halves at once. It depends on the size of the fly and many other things. If you're going to use it as a wing, then you already have pre-shaped wing more or less. After casting it will get a little bit more narrow, perhaps. So you get to this shape. If you stack one or two or three of these, 2, 3 or 4 of these, you get quite a buoyant little fly, and you can use these for your salmon flies if you're in US, or large stone flies or anything like that in Europe. So you can make those even for hopper wings. You just tie this as a wing, you don't need to shape it. Why would you? It's already semi-translucent. You can see my face obviously. You can use it for many things, and it's quite good. You can also cut it, remove the rachis, and use it as dubbing. So different things. Apart from the shape, there's a very big issue of quality. And quality is again, connect it to the shape, connect it to the barbs and barbules. Basically what you need to pay attention to is what? It's number of barbs extending from the rachis and number of barbules extending from those barbs. So the more rich and full the feather is, the better quality it is, the better it will float. It's what I was talking about, surface tension. Simple as that. So don't get those feathers. When you see those feathers that are like almost invisible, then you know you don't have a very good feather. There is one example here. So this is not super bad, but it's not great either. You need to stack probably 3 or 4 of these to make a fly afloat. It's much better if you use this for color on the nymphs, or use it, just pinch out a couple of the barbs and then use it for legs and nymphs. Just find use for it. There is another thing to consider about CDC, the thickness of rachis. You can see that this one is relatively thick, meaning that when you cinch on it with your thread, it's relatively hard for thread to bite into it and secure it super nicely. That's why I like to use GSP with these things. But then again, you have another feather which is kind of smaller. I already showed you, but look at the size of the rachis here and there. It's quite obvious difference that this one on the purple one is much thicker as opposed to this one, which one is thinner. So it's much easier to tie in. Now there is another issue for many people, and that's color can be like all the different colors. You have green, there is some black over here, yellow, purple, and of course probably the best of all, and this is what I like the most. Sometimes this natural is a little bit dark gray, sometimes it's a little bit less dark. For example, this is from mallard that a friend of mine has on his pond, and it kind of has 2 shades of gray. It's almost like grizzly CDC. It's amazing. It's not super rich, at least not obviously super rich, but it's a really good quality CDC out of these ducks. It's super nice and fluffy and light, with moderately thick rachis. So these I like. And there is one more thing to consider when tying a fly. It's the size of the feather. You can see there is one small feather with thin rachis, there is bigger feather with thicker rachis. Obviously, if you want to utilize most of your feather, for small fly use small feather, for large flies use large feathers. Again, for small flies, naturally you're going to use thinner thread, which is usually weaker unless you're using GSP. And for larger flies, you're going to use thicker thread, which is stronger because you're making a larger fly. So everything goes as a domino effect. Small flies, small material, like lighter materials, thinner threads, smaller feathers. Large flies, thick threads, bulkier materials, larger feathers, and so on. So the size of the feather also matters a lot. Obvious applications for this feather. Obvious one would be dry fly, but apart from dry flies, you can use it on nymphs for those legs. You can put it in a dubbing loop, so spin those legs around, or you can just put a couple of bunch of on the left, bunch on the right, and put those legs together. There are different ways to make those legs, and it's only up to you what are you going to do. You can also make some hybrid flies. It's a fly that can float, but if you pull it down it will just sink. So it's a wet fly, dry fly, depending on the situation of the water. Then you can make some streamers. That's also very possible. So it's only up to you how you're going to use this magnificent feather. Now, to show you a couple of techniques you can use, you can implement with this, I'm going to tie an imitation of a stonefly, and I'm going to introduce you to bubble loop wing, then palmering CDC all over the body, and palmering over the thorax. So kind of two techniques about your CDC and how you can use it on your flies. So without any further ado, I'll just introduce you to my materials, which are very simple here. So I'm going to use wildcat fur, dyed olive. It's quite a nice bunch. I have it in my coffee grinder because it's much easier to work with when it's fluffed up. That's going to be for the dubbing. For the hook I'm going to use Daiichi. It's here, it's 1720. I want it because of the length, because I can palmer the fly, do wings, Palmer again on the thorax. So there's plenty of room for the CDC to be used. And for the wings, thorax, and the legs, I will use this CDC that I got from my friend's ducks. I will use GSP primarily because it's strong and it will bite into the rachis of the feather, keeping it stronger, securing it stronger. So before I start tying, I want to run thread through the beeswax just to make it less slippery so it can grip the hook much better. After you do that, cut off the excess. Now to make a dubbing loop, you need to go around your finger with your thread and then a couple of reps around the hook to keep everything in place, and then use the bobbin holder to go around those two legs that you created, around the loop. That will keep those legs together, and then run your thread down the hook until the bend. Now you should select 2 or 3 feathers depending on the hook size for the wings. Align those tips, and you can use, I was mentioning, triangular shape. As you can see, these are with big barbs extending from the bottom, meaning it's triangular shape. I'll just pull all those barbs towards the tips, and then with loose wraps I'll pull the feather up, keep it on the top of the hook shank, and then secure it with tight thread wraps. See, it's going to be good, looking good. Now I'm checking the wing. Is it going to be enough or not? Now for now I'm satisfied. Now I was saying that I have some dubbing here and I want to make a relatively thin dubbing needle. So take just a little clump of dubbing, roll it around your thread. The less you use, the easier it gets to dub it, and it's more secure on your thread, because if you use too much it will be super easy to get off the thread, which if you want to do it for some reason, it's obviously not a wrong solution. Sometimes I like to use Velcro to brush out the dubbing I have on the fly, just to give it a little bit more rough and buggier look. So in those instances I would use a relatively thick dubbing noodle that's again relatively soft. Okay, and I want to stop here. So a little bit around 2/3, maybe a bit more of the body I covered with dubbing. If you want, you can use Velcro, but it's not necessary for this one because I was mentioning that we are going to use oval feather this time. So this was triangular, this is oval, to make some legs over here. Now I don't want the fly to be super bushy, like super like full of CDC. I'll just make and use legs with half of the CDC feathers. So I'll just use 1/2 now and 1/2 for the next fly, obviously. I have my loop, I have dubbing twister. I'll insert dubbing twister into the loop and it gives it a little bit of weight. I'll insert those legs inside, and now when you leave it here, open it and remove the clip. Don't close the clip. It happened to me many times before that before I remove the clip I close it and pull, so I pull all those legs out. Now you can play with those legs and like let them go up and down the dubbing loop, maybe spread them out a little bit, depends how long dubbing loop you want. I'll spin the dubbing twister and then go back and forth with my finger, allowing those legs to spin even more. Okay. Now palmer and pull back. So wrap and pull back, wrap and pull back. As you can see, those legs are not too much You can still see the color of the dubbing. They're just here to suggest and give movement to the fly. Now when you reach this end, you rotate bobbin holder around the dubbing loop, make a couple of wraps, and I'm doing this because GSP is slippery, and by rotating and then securing it, locking it, I just make almost indestructible fly. You can use your dubbing needle for the next step, or you can use your web finishing tool as I'm using it here. So what I want to do, I want to kind of shape up the ragus in this end part to give it a little bit bubbly effect here. As you can see, it will get a shape more easily. Then I'll just pull those barbs to length on the top of the hook. So one loose wrap, two loose wraps, put everything where you want it. Up, 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 up. 3 wraps are plenty. 3 wraps to lock everything. And those last 3 wraps you can actually remove later on if you want. Now what I want to, because this is thin thread, I don't need to think too much about bulk. I'll make another dubbing loop here. And I'll go back with my thread until the wing, okay? Now, I'll just put the dubbing twister here and let the loop rest on my vise somewhere where it's very handy. And I'll add a little bit of more dubbing here. This is the last step. I mean, almost last. Again, in clockwise direction, dub your thread, dub your dubbing around the thread, and clockwise direction because it will tighten even more as you wrap it forward, because with each wrap of your thread around the hook you introduce one clockwise twist in your thread, and by dubbing in the same way you will not untwist your dubbing, you will actually twist it more. I left enough room for the head, enough. Now I have this half of the feather already ready, and I'll insert it in the loop, in the dubbing clip, in the clip. Cut. And one additional tip here. It took me quite a few years to realize how important good scissors are. If you can afford, buy the best possible scissors you can find. It will just make everything much more easier for you. Now this time I want to make this dubbing loop a little bit tighter, those legs a little bit tighter, so I'll put them more close together, and I'll put them very close to the hook because I don't want to have any waste wraps. Again, spin the dubbing twister, go back and forth with your finger, allow everything to wrap more, and then go with this dubbing loop very near the wings a couple of times, and then spiral it forward through the thorax area. And you can maybe notice that I'm pulling. When I make a wrap, I pull additionally to make those legs sink into the dubbing. Just makes everything more secure. And when I am done, again, I will twist tying thread around the loop a couple of times, make 1, 2 wraps, and then you can pull back this thread and lock everything up. Again, I'm gonna get boring here because the thread is slippery. Use the wax or something to make it less slippery, and then whip finish the fly. When you whip finish the fly, try to use flat thread and use adjacent wraps. Don't go wrap over wrap. Go wrap in front of previous one. That will make your knot much thinner, slimmer, better, stronger. Now, this is finished bubble stonefly. It's palmered throughout the body. It's very buoyant, very soft. It will land softly on the surface and it will make your fly irresistible to fish. I do like to brush these a little bit sideways, but when you brush, don't go down because you can catch those barbs from the wing, or you can just do this so you don't catch them, and you can break them if you catch them, so it will make fly even more rough, like from the very beginning. So this is it. Bubble stonefly. Adjust your size to suit your needs, but for bigger ones you will need extra large feathers, and that's it. So guys, thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a like, share, subscribe, comment down below. Comments really help the channel, and see you next week.